Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the btspodcasttz. I'm so glad I get to give you guys a fresh episode, and I can't wait for you to meet the guest that we have today. Now, as is norm, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm your host, Makida Dallas, and joining me is a lady that we have met for I can't hata siwezi kuweka the number of years we've met. Lakini she's a marketing maverick, she's a digital strategist, and above all, by kids' popular opinion, she's a favorite auntie. Allow her to introduce herself.
Hi guys, my name is Tracy Joy Humplick, and as Makida rightfully said, I am a digital marketing maverick, but I'm also an all life learner. So I'm here to share my thoughts and also to learn.
So, without wasting time, I'd like to introduce today's topic, today's conversation, which was sparked by current things that are happening online, from a global space to a local space. So, what will we be talking about today? The Him Too movement. Ever heard of that? I know, interesting, right? So today tutakuwa tunaongelea Him Too movement, redefining masculinity, and a bit of GBV, which is gender based violence. I know it's a sensitive topic, but we'll be talking about it in order to spark a conversation that we might look at things differently. We might learn a few things or two. So, kicking off, what is Him Too movement? What can you say about it, Tracy?
So actually, the Him Too movement, from my understanding, is it was a result of the Me Too movement. They're not separate. They're actually related to some extent. For those who don't know, the Me Too movement was started around empowering the girl child, about female inclusion. It was around supporting women who are also going through gender based violence and all. Now, as a result of the Me Too movement, it got a lot of traction. Wakaona, the boy child amesaulika kidogo, and there were increasing number of cases where the male child or the man was also experiencing the same. Ko wakaanzisha the Him Too movement. So on the other side kuna Me Too, and then Him Too movement came up. Yeah.
You know what I find interesting about it is that how it was me too, and people are like, him too. Kwa nini mtoto wa kiume masaulika?
Yeah.
But if you look at it closely, maybe whoever started it as a clap back.
And the Me Too.
Exactly. But it then spiraled into something that it's quite serious
Yeah.
from a global context, from a local context, and you come to understand that looking into it, the boy child has been forgotten.
Yeah.
So the first time you heard about it, what
Yeah.
came to your mind?
If I'm being honest, the first time I heard about Him Too, I didn't really have a positive reaction to it. I don't like using this word, but I was kind of triggered, where I felt like society for the longest has always been favoring the man. And finally, the Me Too movement comes up, and we have a voice as women, and we are getting the support and the attention around the world. So when I heard about Him Too, my first reaction was like, oh, wow, you even want to take this from us. Like,
Exactly.
what more can you take? Like, the world has already been designed for you, and this little thing that we have na hiyo pia mnaitaka. So that was my first reaction, if I'm being honest. But then we had a discussion kazini, and one of the things that we learned, it was actually a client, an NGO client, had come up with a brief. At the time I was in the agency side, and kwenye hiyo brief they talked about gender based violence level ya watoto. And surprisingly, some of the facts zilizo come up. Did you know kwamba 1 in 8 boys have been sexually abused? Yani 1 out of 8 boys in a room have been sexually abused.
In a Tanzanian statistic.
Yes, this is a Tanzanian research. And in like 12-month period, or like in a year, unakuta about 35% of men in marriages have been abused by their spouses, but they don't talk about it. And this data ilikuwa ina vary, yani mikoa kwa mikoa. There are certain regions the number is even bigger. So when we were going through this brief, kusema kweli I felt kama ilinisuta, because then all of a sudden I was like, so kumbe even men are going through these things, and it made me want to learn more. So kama as usual nikaingia Google, I started like googling, learning about it, and I realized there's a big problem. Sasa hivi society, hata ukiangalia brands, everybody wants inclusivity, right?
Yes.
But the word inclusivity wameilink na wanawake. Kwa unakuta yani we've kind of gone overboard on the female side.
It's becoming like a marginalized group.
You just look at it. Sasa hivi even hiring, kampuni zina prioritize wanawake. You know, if you look at financial backing, like entrepreneurs, the moment you say you're a female founder, you know,
added advantage.
Ukiangalia kwenye upande wa STEM, the moment you put the word women in STEM, it
changes the ball game. Thinking, yes, you hear that.
And then I sat down, nikaangalia, even in our day-to-day lives kwenye familia. Sasa hivi a lot of decisions are being made to make sure the girl is comfortable. Is she safe? You know, the types of schools we're taking them to. Even teachers, ukiongea na walimu sasa hivi, there's a lot of pressure around the girl child. Is she safe in the classroom? Is she safe in the playground? Sasa hivi a girl akiwa reserved kidogo, there's a panic, like what happened to her, mbona amebadilika, you know. And a lot of this attention has sort of taken it away from the other side, which is the boy, the man. And unfortunately, jinsi muda unavyozidi kwenda, we are even more forgetting that inclusivity is about equality regardless of the gender. Hata ukiangalia the Me Too movement ilivyoanza, the original Me Too movement, it was around the pay gap between how much women were earning versus, it had nothing to do with sex or violence. It was more about the economy. Watu walikuwa wanaangalia kwamba Makida is doing this job, and then this guy is doing the same job, but the guy would be paid extra for the same thing. I remember even
Oprah spoke about that.
Yeah. So when it started, it started with a financial like perspective.
Yes.
Then kidogo, because it was getting media attention, it was getting like companies were paying attention, kidogo wakaanza kuinject agenda nyingine kule ndani. Now the good and bad side of any movement is there are people who try and take advantage, or they try and capitalize on it for their personal agenda. So whether it's Me Too or Him Too, both movements is in a pros na cons. Yeah. So I don't know, I can ask you a question. In your life right now, have you noticed kwamba we tend to prioritize sana the female agenda more than the male? Have you seen any examples of those? Because I have many to give.
I totally agree, and I think it comes out, unapoiongelea, people tend to say, no, lakini huangalii wanawake, we're still not there. We totally agree. But when somebody thinks of it in the context, if this was my son, suddenly it changes.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like if you're okay with something, if this was your son, would you embrace this? If that atmosphere changes, then there's something wrong. So many people who are speaking about the Him Too movement is they're wearing the shoes of a brother, of a son, but rarely it's a husband, rarely it's a workmate. So what that tells us is that you ignore it until when inakuhusu directly.
And when it hits home,
exactly. And I feel this issue, mpaka ukiangalia at when you're talking about kids, it has always been about protecting the female child. And that's why statistics like what you just spoke about hazijulikani.
Hazijulikani, yeah.
Hazijulikani. Ukienda ukiangalia rape cases, nini cases, it's always the female child. Lakini ikiwa mwanaume, that you're like, oh, we forgot about that. This is a situation about you take your kids to school. I have a daughter, I take her to school. And you're like, everybody's worried about, but are you worried about the boy child who's here? Is he safe? So
there's also one thing ambayo nimenotice. When we think of someone being treated unfairly, or discrimination, or violence, we always think of it from a physical point of view. Kwamba it's a physical act. We forget kwamba kuna the emotional side. Kama I've heard this before, kwamba maneno yanakata kuliko hata, yani like your words can harm someone more than your punch. Sasa when you think of a man, you are thinking strength. You are thinking mwanaume siwezi kumzidi nguvu.
The traditional masculinity.
So when you think of a man being abused, yani your brain in a struggle because you've associated abuse and violence with the physical side of it. So you're thinking, mwanaume wamemzidi nguvu kivipi? Especially when it's the opposite gender that's inflicting the violence on the man. Lakini ukisikia mwanaume abuse mwanaume mwenzake, all of a sudden you feel this rage because your brain is telling you there's a possibility kwamba they are both strong lakini mmoja amezidi mwenzake. But the thought of a woman abusing a man, yani your brain
fails to register,
like how, you know?
Yes,
but utakuta it's not even the physical side. Maybe this woman is tapping into the emotional side. You know, sisi wanawake tukikasirika, we inflict that rage through our own emotions. Na when we are really pissed off, maneno yetu yanakuwa makali zaidi. Kwa unakuta a woman can struggle to punch you, lakini she'll tell you these 2 sentences ambazo yani they can even make you flip. I remember there was a time we did this campaign. Ilikuwa ni I think it was a beer brand, and it was around gender-based violence. It was around the Women's Month, which is coming up, by the way, in March.
Yes, in March.
And this brand walichokifanya in South Africa, before one of the biggest football games started, pale kwenye before the kickoff, walifanya like a demonstration on the pitch where these women came and they were singing, and I think they walikuwa wamechora something either on themselves or they were holding cards. I don't remember the full story, lakini they did something in the middle of the field, and this was streamed live, and it was around the increasing cases of domestic violence against women. And hiyo kitu ilipata so much traction, so much mileage, because it's very easy to picture a man harming a woman. But the moment someone comes up and says mwanaume sehemu fulani was inflicted violence by their spouse, then all of a sudden you start hearing fake news. Au he's seeking sympathy. Au inawezekanaje mwanaume bwege. You know, like let's be honest. Society tulivyo. We're still stuck kwenye ile mindset ya the physical. Lakini we forget kwamba mwanaume anaweza akawa strong physically and weak emotionally. And even the way we raise our sons, it can affect them ukubwani. You know, like everything is connected. The same way the girl child goes through things,
the same way the boy child also.
Yeah, so for me, I think we've lost track of the real meaning of inclusivity. And we're picking sides that make sense to us at the time. For instance, like I said, when I started Mwanzoni, I had a negative perception of him too. But then after actually reading about it, I started opening up my thought process.
Okay. Yeah. So you see, on the same note, when you're speaking about traditional masculinity, nadhani tukae hapo kidogo tuongelee, because I think tunaichukulia as a society, tunaichukulia lightly, not knowing it's deeply rooted and affects your generation, your kids. I think the blanket on traditional masculinity is ndo kama hivyo. Mwanaume akilia, wewe unaliaje ni mwanaume? Mwanaume bwege. Jikaze. They are already born into a world where there is this traditional masculinity, which I think has been misconstrued. So there are very few safe spaces for men. Even in the Tanzanian context, I'm not too sure. I think there are a few mental health podcasts on men. And
I think there were two others as
two
well.
others. There's a lady who's also a therapist that also has a safe space, but that's about it. And people are not pushing the agenda because I feel ni muhimu tukaongelea traditional masculinity then tukaongelea toxic masculinity, because people need to understand how we're gonna raise or support the male society. And in the Tanzanian context, I feel tayari wanakuwa expected, wanaume wanakuwa expected, like you can't fail, you can't cry. Unaenda kwa mamako unaomba ushauri nini? Mwanaume jikaze. They grow up with a lot of trauma. And as much as you say, wanakuwa physically strong, but the emotional damage is so bad such that it affects their kids. They don't know how to really talk to their boy child. Because mimi nakuwa na embrace na feature yale ambayo nimepitia, but I'm pushing my child not to be deep down. They know this. I have got an issue with connecting on my emotions. I can't express them. Hence, they also suppress them. That's why we've got a very dysfunctional. A very dysfunctional, and I don't want this to come out the wrong way. I think a very dysfunctional group of men, because they're confused on what their identity should be, what they should look like. They're embarrassed to go to therapy. So you find it's either I'm an alpha male, I'm macho, and I'm bullying, and I'm nini, but deep down kumbe ame no offense, like I'm a softie. But that doesn't mean. I feel there's a need to redefine traditional masculinity.
I think before we talk about toxic masculinity, I think kuna traditional definition na kuna the modern one. Traditional ni ile ambayo ni ya zamani tuseme, where in the household, I'll just give very easy examples in a typical household in Tanzania. Kuna hii concept ya baba mwenye nyumba, right? Or the dad is like the overall authority in the house. Nothing goes without his approval. Then there's the concept of the provider. The man is the one who's constantly providing. He's providing the finances, he's providing the food. Yani mtoto akiumwa, any issue happen in the house, mwanaume ndo anategemewa ku resolve the issue. Then there's the concept of discipline. When you discipline your child, kuna ile unasema ngoja baba akirudi, au unataka babako aje kujua, nimwambie babako. Yani kuna ile fear that inakuwa instilled kuanzia utotoni. And it's not just for the boy child, even the girl child. Anajua kabisa kwamba dad is the authority figure. Then kuna the concept of relationship kati ya mama na baba. That whole lovey-dovey thing ambayo tunaionaga kwenye movie, tunasema mambo ya kizungu haya. Yani they are not even allowed to show affection.
Yes,
akimhug mke wake, akimkiss mke wake, utasikia wazungu hao. Yani in a typical Tanzanian household, have you ever seen dad kissing mom and saying I love you? No.
And if even they do in the slightest, it's kind of awkward.
Awkward. Then there's the concept of advice. When you go to your dad, you better be going for a serious thing. Yani huwezi ukaenda na kitu cha kijinga. Vitu vya kijinga unaenda kwa mama. Ila kwa dad you're going for a serious thing.
Nataka nakwambia kamwambie babako.
And if it's a serious thing, kuna a huge possibility that he can discourage you from doing that thing. Kwa hiyo yani unaenda uko prepared. Yani you have all your facts straight.
Yes.
Now that is a household where kuna baba na mama. Siku hizi household nyingi ni single mothers. If you've noticed, a lot of boys are growing up in single mom households.
Do you feel that is scary?
It's very scary, and let me tell you why. Because all those structures that build foundation ya mtoto, all of a sudden it's coming from one side. Unakuta the mom has to play the role that a dad would play in a typical traditional setting. She's now the nurturer and the discipliner. She's now the provider and the one who's like loving on you. You know, yani inabidi na yeye ajibadilishe, aanze kujifunza roles zote mbili. Mind you, even the way we've been designed biologically, or even the way our brain processes things, it will never be the same.
Sure.
Kwa hiyo, as much as single moms are doing their best, they can never really bring the same value kama the dad would have brought kwenye maisha ya mtoto. Kwa unakuta tayari kuna gap. Tayari hadi hapo in a household where there's no dad. Leave away the traditional masculinity definition. Imagine the one of a single mother household.
It's even more
and you know, toxic masculinity is two sides. Most of the time tunaiwaza in the sense of an alpha male ambaye amezidi, but there's also toxic masculinity ya upande wa pili, where they are too emotional, they are too girly, yani because hawaja tune into their natural
manly
like it
gender
has
into their
basically in a side mbili. It's not just one side. Sasa now wakija kuwa watu wazima, the way they carry themselves, you can tell huyu ali grow up kwenye nyumba ya aina gani. Now there's the modern version of masculinity, the one where we expect a man to be strong but emotionally intelligent. Yani awe mwanaume lakini he should be able to read emotions and give emotion. We're expecting this man to be the provider, but asinifuatilie sana, asininyime when I want to do my own things. Yani we now want the best of both worlds from the same man. Then there's the generational issue. Mwanaume ambaye ni millennial na mwanaume ambaye ni Gen Z, they are never going to be the same. Huyu amekuwa kwenye mazingira tofauti. For example, mmoja probably grew up at the time when their parents were still hustling. Kwa ile hustle is in them. Then huyu mwingine amezaliwa, things are good.
Relate. Yani,
they can't relate. Kwa you're expecting huyu ambaye amekuwa kwenye maisha mazuri awe na ile natural instinct ya kuwa provider, awe na ile natural instinct ya kustep up when things go south. Yani hai click, and you can't blame them because ndo mazingira walio kulia. So there's traditional masculinity in the sense that mama, baba, this is how the child should behave. Then there's modern masculinity where you get all the above plus emotional intelligence.
Does it exist?
You see how they're conflicting? Because traditional imemwambia usilie, usilalamike, jikaze, vumilia, blah blah blah. Right?
Yeah.
So basically you're telling him squash that emotional side of you. And he does it for so long. And then now he's someone's boyfriend and he's supposed to be emotionally intelligent. How?
Yeah.
The same guy who grew up being told to suppress emotions then to some extent we are not being realistic. Kwa hiyo I don't know.
And that you see, talking about it that way, you can almost, if you look at your circle or people you know, you'd realize this is somebody. You see where the gaps are. But what is healthy masculinity then? What does that look like? I have my kama unavyosema una expectations, we disregard pia kweli. Unakutana na your partner, you disregard whatever background akawa raised, vipi unaweka expectations zako. But it's true they struggle, but what does healthy masculinity then look like?
I don't think there's a straightforward answer for that question because it's a very subjective thing. Yani, what I regard as masculine is not what you regard. It's not what anyone else would regard. So I would say, if I was to attempt to answer that question, because they're gonna come for me.
It's an attempt, guys. Relax. It's an attempt.
And also, I feel that as we answer this question, we also need to acknowledge the fact that you and I are both women. So
Yes.
probably mwanaume ange-approach very differently.
Guys, it's a female edition.
Yes.
There's a male one coming up, but this is a
Yeah.
female
I think
edition.
it's important to call that out.
Yes.
Kwamba we're discussing a topic ambao mwanaume anaweza kaiwaza tofauti. But for me, I think healthy masculinity should be something that haimbadilishi mtu to an extent where it's working against their natural instinct. For instance, strength, right? Kila mwili una strength levels tofauti. It can be built over time. But I cannot expect the definition of masculinity to be mwanaume anaweza kuibeba kochi na mkono mmoja. You get? For me, that's still toxic because not everyone can do that.
Yeah.
Or the concept of he's 100% the provider. The economy is changing. Siku hizi kupata hela so rahisi. Everybody is hustling, both men and women. So ile expectation kwamba mwanaume ndo anabeba all the expenses, it can be alright if it's realistic. If it is not realistic, then you are bordering towards toxic masculinity. For example, labda tuko kwenye ndoa, si ndio? Na imetokea kwamba mimi as the wife, I just have a role that pays more. So my expectation of the man will be driven by how much I'm earning. Because I'll change my lifestyle.
Of course.
And the moment my lifestyle changes, I'll be expecting you to
step up.
It's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it kind of motivates the man to do more or to want more, si ndio?
Yeah.
Lakini ile pressure, yani akiingia tu ndani naanza kumblast kwamba hajafanya ABCD. Yani that pressure already is very unhealthy. So for me, healthy masculinity is how can we let men be their truest form without dictating or trying to change them to fit our definition while it's harming them. Yani ukiona unambadilisha mtu in a way ambayo inamharm hata yeye, then I think it's not healthy.
It's not healthy.
Yeah.
I think that's quite interesting. It's an interesting take of things.
Yeah.
Because you're pulling them away from the original DNA. Suddenly they're struggling to find their identity.
Yeah, mental health.
Mental health.
Squeezy, a lot of men are going through stuff and, you know.
Do you think we can break the cycle?
Yes, it's very possible. And I think it's already happening. Like, I think kwenye the Him Too movement, if you look at it, it's allowed for people to have dialogue. The fact that you and I are even discussing this is a good sign. Kwamba we've noticed. And we're talking about it. Now, to break the cycle, I think everyone needs to play a role in it. Kuanzia ndani ya nyumba, the household, shuleni, kwenye maeneo ya kazi, organizations, especially NGOs that are getting funding. I think the government also plays a huge role in it. The same way they've done it for the girl side.
Yeah.
I feel that they can do the same. Corporates, kwa mfano, most companies have their CSR departments. Our foundation wanaanzisha. Kuna private entities, Melinda Gates, Bill Gates, those type of that level. If everyone played a role in driving the inclusivity agenda and remove gender at all, I think that would break all cycles. But the moment we try and like streamline it to one side, ndo tunapokosea. Because if we overdo the Him Too movement, now all of a sudden the girl child suffers. If you overdo the Me Too movement, the boy child. So for me, I think to break the cycle, we should focus on inclusivity regardless of the gender.
The gender.
Yeah.
I also, because just leaning into that, I also think it's very possible to break the cycle. But the first thing is people must understand the current situation we're in. Because I think a lot of us are naive about it.
Yeah.
People are looking at it as another cry for help, people just being men are stubborn. I think there's need to look into it. Lakini pia additionally, I think kuna opportunity kubwa kuchukua learnings katika what didn't work for the Me Too movement, because we've seen how that has been misconstrued, blown out of proportion. It's always a sensitive topic when you're a woman and you're in the room and you're saying, guys, okay, I know it's women empowerment, but I think we're pushing it. And it's the truth. These are uncomfortable conversations that people don't want to have. There are contexts whereby you feel like, no, this isn't right. I feel, again, equality in the sense of let's hear out the boy child and the girl child. Lakini, the same way that the guardrails, there hasn't been guardrails and it has been pushed out of proportions. I think there's also a risk in the Him Too movement. If we take those learnings and apply them here, it will work well. We saw the global case, Nani, Paris of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp, and Amber Heard. How everybody,
that was very brave of him.
Very brave of him. But if it couldn't be done to that magnitude, the world wouldn't be paying attention. And we're seeing it happen over and over again. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds against Justin Baldoni. But I'm just saying, now imagine in the Tanzanian context, how many people or victims cannot just, I don't want to use man up because, again, I don't want to use those words. How many people are like, would I be believed? Would I be?
And that's the biggest issue, is when anyone speaks up, whether it's a man or a woman, believability of the listeners is a crucial aspect to solving the problem. If you stand up and you are courageous enough kusema kitu fulani kinanitokea, mara nyingi wanaokusikiliza ndo wana determine the end result. If they believe you, then change will happen. The moment they come with ile wameziba masikio au kuna hii stigma, there's a certain stigma people get for sharing what they went through. People say, huyu anatafuta sympathy, anataka tumwone huruma. Like hata ukiangalia hapa Tanzania, sana sana celebrities, because they have platforms, au they're invited to platforms. The moment celebrity akisema amepitia ABC, wewe ukiingia kwenye comments, there's this battle between, oh, you are so brave, to anataka tumwone huruma, you know, because people are coming from this point of view kwamba the fact that umefika kwenye level, umeitwa kwenye platform, then your life is good, so just shut up about it. Kuna hii bias ambayo tunakujaga nayo, so I think we have a very long way to go. And the good news is people are having these conversations. Kuna michakato imeanza, lakini we still have a very long way to go.
Yeah, and I feel public is ruthless.
Very.
People are associating, even ndomana unaona wasanii, celebrities wako hesitant to come forward and say something. I think public associate how you look, your net worth, your state of mind, your posture. If I come here and say, and I'm just wearing lipstick and I'm having my braids and I'm like, nimepigwa, oh my God, and I cry on this tablet.
And you're people are like, beautiful. And
exactly. People associate a misery.
Because you have money, you have no problem.
Exactly. And I think that's wrong. Because you can't tell a trauma victim by people have adjusted. There's one who's covering up, that's their way of showing. There's one who's in depression. Depression looks different. I feel the public should have better assessment. Take a step back. People audit your profile and go hard on you. That's why celebrities unaona wanakuwa hammered. There was also a comedian, a female comedian who last month I think came out about her struggles on postpartum depression and how that spiraled into. Yet nobody saw it. Nobody saw it. But I can guarantee you, because I have if you look at the soaps and my household, my nephews, my nieces, also, you find the TV is on with Dada watching that. So I'm also, she's a very familiar character. I could tell something was wrong, but I couldn't keep a finger to it. As a woman, when you make an abrupt decision, an extreme
Like
change in
cutting your
lifestyle,
hair.
cutting your hair, getting ink, and then suddenly you're an indoor person, you're an introvert, you suddenly become an extrovert. Having
You start like substance abuse.
it was right there. I noticed, and I remember telling my dad, this girl doesn't look okay, but I couldn't keep a finger to it. I know she had 2 kids back to back, so I was like, something is wrong. But so when she had that meltdown, I was like, how come?
Sasa imagine ingekuwa ni mwanaume.
Imagine
ameitwa pale labda media house imemuita au yeye mwenyewe ajirekodi and then aende apost kwamba for the past 2 years mwanamke wake anampiga.
Can you imagine?
Do you know what will happen?
If they roasted the lady like that,
nobody
wanted to hear it. I'm like, guys, are we this naive on postpartum depression? And then ingekuwa mwanaume, I don't know. So I feel like
there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of naivety. Lakini pia in general I feel like mitandao pia imetufanya tumekuwa bullies.
Yes.
Yani the concept kwamba nikichukua simu yangu sasa hivi nikienda nikiandika comment fulani, consequences hazipo because you don't know me.
Yes.
Plus utanifanyaje? Are you gonna take me to court? Utakuja utanipiga. Kwa hiyo kuna ile confidence fulani ambayo mitandao imetupa. So yani the way we approach things squeeze. Kwanza we don't take things seriously. Alafu pili tuna amnesia fulani, yani tunasahau haraka sana. Yani we forget. And then kuna kufuata mkumbo, kuna ile peer pressure fulani, yani ukiingia kwenye comments you start gauging where do people masupporters wengi wako wapi. Ushaikuona hizi comments za kama unamsupport fulani like hii comment.
And they have a lot of likes.
Yes. So
kama you think she's lying, like
yani hiyo ndo inafanya mpaka trying to bring a positive change inakuwa ni ngumu. Because not going to lie, you can get it right nyumbani, you can get it right mashuleni, you can get it right kazini, but mitandao ina power. Na mitandao ni kitu ambacho mtu anaingia kila siku asubuhi mpaka jioni. So unless there's a way we can solve the internet, the approach that we have on the internet, then we have a long way to go. And it's very possible the solution could be kumjenga mtu, yani the man, to be so secure in their masculinity, the healthy kind, to a point where no matter what someone says or does, haimu affect. That's the hardest job.
Oh yes.
Kumjenga to a point where yani anajiamini and he stands on business. Yani wewe njoo with your own viewpoint.
But this is me.
That is how we win this battle. Yani like if you're a mom who's raising a boy, or a dad, or both of you are together raising a boy child, I would suggest kumjenga self-esteem. Because everything drills down to how you perceive yourself. Mimi naweza nikawa hapa naongea na wewe Makida, lakini labda when I leave that door I pick up on my insecurities. Naweza nikaongea confidently hapa mbele za watu, lakini narudi nyumbani kudundo.
Yes.
And I am okay, and I've learned to be okay with it. Because speaking up is even more scary. Au unakuta because of my low self-esteem I'm attracting the abuser. Unajua kuna hicho kitu
Yes.
Au labda
narcissist.
When I grew up this is what I saw happening. Kwa naona hii ni kawaida. Kuna I remember when I moved back to TZ niliambiwa kuna tribes ambazo wanawake wanawadunda sana wanaume. Like it's known. I don't know what, and I don't want to mention it, lakini yes, I was told kuna hicho kitu. And even when I was in Kenya, kuna hicho kitu. Kwamba hey, umeoa mwanamke wapi? Hey. Yani wewe you are ready for kudundwa. We kind of normalize it. Kwa unakuta mtu baadaye ukija kumwambia this is not right, anashindwa kukuelewa because wamejicondition to a certain way. So I think building self-esteem is important. Having more conversations like this is important because tunavyoongea kuna mtu atasikiliza, itamfanya na yeye atafakari. And then also I think kufanya research. Sometimes you don't believe something until someone shows you how big of that thing is.
Yes.
Kwa mfano nilivyoanza nilisema that research, the data tulivyokuwa tunaiangalia ndo
1 out of 8 kids.
Out of, when somebody tells you 1 out of 8 boys in this room has been sexually abused, it lands heavily kuliko kusema boys are being abused.
Of course.
Because now your brain is like, is it that big of a problem? But if you say 1 in every 8 boys, now all of a sudden
it's a
you're
picture.
like, what?
That is
huge, So I think more research needs to be done. This information needs to be shared widely. Na educating people. Sometimes unakuta mtu anafanya kitu hajui ni kibaya because no one told them otherwise. Sana sana huko like mikoani where labda hawana exposure to, so I think there's a lot of awareness and education that needs to be done.
Totally agree. And just to add on, cementing that, Nania, practical ways also. Building self-esteem. I think I say it can sound easy, but I feel instilling that in families, especially confidence starts at home. Knowing that you're enough. It's not even about the big things. Many times as parents, even with experience with our parents, they find that either giving you something, being a monetary value tied to it. But I'll give an example. I grew up in a safe household. I'd never felt any insecurities. We weren't rich, we weren't poor, but my parents were present. I had never faced an issue where I had, what do they call it? Body image issues, labda, identity crisis. And I think it came from a place whereby my mom was very affirmative in you're enough, you're beautiful. Reassurance. Now the reality check, or I realized there's a problem when I went to boarding school. And there was so much confusion going around and so much insecurity, crisis. And I was like, what? For the first time, I remember in boarding school, for the first time, I realized, I'm fat. I'd never considered, I'd never thought about it. In primary, I was a skinny kid. I gained weight in secondary. But my parents had never brought it up like it's an issue. And suddenly in secondary, I have a body image issue. I started changing my dress code. I started changing this. But I was like, the power of affirmations. And when how your parents or your community instills in you, it's very determining of the individual you grow up to be. So it was, I remember that clearly because I was like, secondary nikaanza kupata identity crisis. I started dressing, I'm confused, am I a girl or a tomboy? I'm in the middle. And then my mom had, luckily my mom was a nurse. She's retired now. She saw it. She sat down with me and told me, I remember very clearly when she told me, there are many phases you'll go through life. That doesn't mean you should lose focus of who you are. You've got to have your values, that they are who you are no matter what somebody says. Kida, this is you. So I just wanted to cement that because also we are raising the kids of the adults of tomorrow. So so closing off, ungependa our listeners before you close off, what is, if you're to say one thing that will be a takeout in this conversation, because I find it very helpful, very engaging. And just what message would that be? And before you close, I just want to highlight something, then you'll close with the takeaway. Ningependa kusema kwamba this is a conversation
Yeah.
that we've been having between us. We understand and also grasping on the impact of gender-based violence to both male and females. We encourage for a safe space. Reach out to a person, a community. You're not alone. I think it's very important kusema hivyo. We condone any situations like that. Na ningependa pia kusema find communities. Find somebody that you trust. I would pin down some of the podcasts because when you're listening to spaces like this, they help you feel you're not alone and the right ways to approach it. I would pin them on my YouTube channel, btspodcasttz, so that for anybody who's going through a similar situation and is seeking for a support group, a person or community or counseling lines, I think there are free ones, if I'm not mistaken, that the government has. I'll just confirm that.
Yeah.
But I would pin it on this episode on the bio. Okay. With that, Tracy, what's that one thing that you'd want people to walk away from this?
I think if I was to give a final comment or a final remark, I would say, let us be better. What I mean is, there's something that one of the people I consider my mentors keeps saying is, when you know better, you do better. I think inabidi tuwe a bit more intentional about learning more about things, especially the ones with impact.
100%.
Tujifunze kuelewa. Let's do our research. Let's keep ourselves informed. We should hold ourselves accountable. There are times we do things or say things bila kuwaza hii kitu ina impact vipi huyu mtu. And sometimes it happens in the heat of the moment, labda ukiwa na hasira or anything. So I think we need to be more self-aware. For instance, kuna bias ambazo tunazo na hatujui. Maybe, for example, I grew up in a single mom household. My definition of masculinity is probably very wrong, or probably it's the right one, I don't know. But just informing and educating yourself, talking to people and being open-minded. Kama mimi na wewe tumediscuss hivi and there are people who will watch it, I would encourage them to also share their views, because the more people share a different perspective, the more we learn. It should not be Tracy na Makida said this, so this is it. It should always be, what do you think? And why. Always ask yourself why.
True.
Why something matters. So in summary, let's be better. Let's know what better is and actually
do better.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tracy.
Thank you too.
I'm so glad to have you here.
Same.
Looking forward for more of this. And just to close off, guys, let's remember the conversation starts here, but it doesn't end here. Let's keep talking. Until next time, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube, at btspodcasttz, on Instagram, btspodcasttz, Facebook, btspodcasttz, and TikTok, btspodcasttz. See you sooner than later. Bye.